Hi there. My name is Ginger Voigt, and I am the author of almost 40 published works. I am a screenwriter, a poet, and a word witch. Here on this channel, we will discuss story. We're going to talk about the craft and everything that relates to the magic of creation. I invite you to come on in and set a spell. Okay, welcome back. I should, I'm going to catch you up on a few things because first of all, I'm a sobby weepy mess because this is the third time I've been trying to record this, and there's been technical difficulties on every single one. So whatever God is trying to accomplish with this re-edit, then I hope we get to it quickly because I don't know how much emotional fortitude I have left. Apologize, but we're going to power through it. Okay, we're going to get through it. And let me talk about a little bit about what we're talking about today's topic. And I should let you know that it is not the topic I intended. I had planned all like 20 some odd videos ahead of time and timed them where I wanted them. So today I wanted to originally talk about storytelling heroes that have inspired me, but today is actually the day that it's the anniversary of my mom's death. She died on December 6th, 2015, which is 10 years ago today. And so I wanted to take a pause and to honor her and what it meant to me as far as my journey as a storyteller and a person. And I should let you know that I'm always going to be a little emotional around the holidays. I love Christmas. I love, 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 love Christmas. It's one of my favorite holidays. And I really lean into it to wrangle as much joy out of it as I can because December and January are the hardest months in my life. They encompass a few different very sad anniversaries. Anyway, but December, the there I lost both my parents. I became an orphan in 2015, but I did lose both of my parents on in December. Yeah, my dad died on December 19th in 1980, which was extraordinarily upsetting to happen in general, but to put it in Christmas season was particularly cruel for someone who just loves Christmas. And coming home from a funeral to presents under the tree from dad was a memory that, you know, the core memory. Blue AF, okay? Um, if you know, you know. Well, but my mom died in December 6th, 2015. These are anniversaries that are going to hit me a little harder. And so you're going to see a little bit more of an emotional me, on top of the fact that I've been on this kind of new spiritual journey. And a lot of the digging out and rooting around of generational trauma and just trauma uh has been it's been a lot of heavy lifting, and I have been a little bit more of an emotional marshmallow than usual. So I wanted to be able to talk about my mom and just how from her learning how to be independent and never say die, and even in the face of things that you just could fathom imagining or fathom happening to you, um and having to roll with it and figure it out and survive. My mom, and like my Stephen's mom, they were kind of on the cusp of the equal rights movement without meaning to be. I don't think either one of them would have signed up for it voluntarily, but when you have no choice, you have no choice. And they were the heads of the household, and they had to be, mother and father and provider, and that wasn't easy. And for my mom, she was working a factory when my dad died. She was working second shift. In fact, I was at home alone, um, because he was in the hospital at the time. But I was at home alone when we got the call, and they didn't tell me, thank God. But spiritually, I knew because he was in the hospital. He had had a stroke on around the 6th of December, around this area of time. He had a stroke and he was in the hospital, died of a heart attack on December 19th, which was his birthday. So it was just a whole lot of punches all in one. And my mother, like I said, she was working second shift and she couldn't, leave me like that permanently. We had to find a stopgap, so she ended up leaning on my Aunt Gertrude. And my Aunt Gertrude was a bigger reader or more than I was, and she had these huge stacks of white covered Harlequins that she would get four at a time with a subscription service. And I dug into that stack of books like you would not believe. There is no one who needs a happily ever after more than a little kid that just lost her dad, and I was all about it. And I was, inhaling them one right after the other. And I'd only remember two stories out of all of them, and both of them ended up, inspiring other stories for me. So there, take that for what it is. Um, but yeah, she ended up moving to a insurance job. That was the one that I was telling you about that had the newsletter that would feature my writing. And then that's where she met another woman who was a divorcee, also in like, this was 81 ish and 81, 82. And they decided to move in together and share expenses and have a bigger house and a nicer neighborhood and that kind of thing. And so that ended up also inspiring a book later on. Um, so it was this path that we were on. And, you know, There was it was hard because we weren't really connecting, even though I can't imagine anyone closer to me than my mom. And God knows she tried, really did. Even though I didn't get the Atari I wanted because we didn't have any money. And even though I didn't have MTV, we didn't have money. And even though, I felt like she loved my sister more than me. And that my dad, who was on my team, my mom and my sister, and me and my dad died, and I was like, I felt alone. And I had been feeling alone since I had suffered some trauma when I was 4. We'll get into that apparently, because that's what I do now, is I open up my wounds and let people inside. But I mean, you do that as a writer. You just get to pretend it's happening to other people. In my books, though, you will the they do the wounds do ooze a little bit sometimes. But I mean, she was there for me, and she took care of me, and she worked very hard. When she ended up working in a convenience store, she ended up, working double shifts on holidays to bring in more money. I would go down there, I would help her. I remember being in, refrigerated back on and putting in, beer and soda and all that sort of stuff. Had no business. Probably illegal as hell, but what are they gonna do? Arrest her, she's dead. Um, I mean, I guess they could arrest me, but whatever. Uh, I just my childhood, having so much time on my own, being able to be in that storytelling space a lot, me be such a big influence as it was for a lot of latchkey kids. I mean, all of that, all of the path is what led me to do what I do and tell the stories I tell, perspective that I have honed, all of it. So I could not have become me without my mom. And like I said, she did try. Like when I would, you know, play my music for her, she actually pulled out a few songs that she liked. And one of which is Drive by us, which they now play as music in the supermarket. So if you ever see a large woman weeping in the refrigerated section, that's me, and that's why. So it's a moment that I felt that I needed to honor her because she never really got that in her life. She was the hard worker who put her head down and sacrificed everything for everybody else, which is a toxic trait for sure that I learned and I'm, trying to heal from. But she really did everything she could to make my life good. And, we fought a lot. And, you know, they say the Pisces Scorpio connection is supposed to be, more of, you know, a soul fit, but we were oil and water for so many years. And yet here I am with her best qualities of never say die, never give up, work your ass off, take care of your family. My kids lost their dad, and I ended up having to you know, live, walk in those shoes. If you were thinking that karma doesn't exist, boy, howdy, does it ever. And I lived it. And all of those things ended up inspiring things in the future in my storytelling, which she was never a reader, but she read my books. Tell me that's not a mom. But where my mom comes into play, specifically in my writing, is there's two stories that I kind of some trauma. And the first one is Comic Squad. It's a mid-grade family fantasy that I love to this. My favorite lead characters is a 11-year-old girl named Alice Thornton, and she was very close to her dad. He passes away, and he leaves her a comic book. They shared this passion and love for this comic book series, and it ended up opening a portal in between the two worlds. And so it's a story about how to become your own hero, because plot twist, the hero can't function in our world. Makes the villain stronger and the hero weaker. So what happens in that scenario? Well, a group of geeks had to go from zero to hero in that story, and that's what happened. And that's the plot. But the emotional meat of it was that she and her mom had a disconnect because they weren't close. The dad had passed, and the mom was working, trying her best to do her best with a child who really kind of resented that the parent she was closest to was the one who died, you know. And those are childish thoughts that needed a voice, and that's where they went. Um, in It started out as a screenplay. I ended up novelizing it. It is one of the nano books that did not make the 50,000 word limit because it's a shorter format book, and it does now, by the way. But I mean, I had to rewrite it later and found a way to kind of even beef up the whole part of the mom, because she deserved it. And I realized that after I wrote the story, that I was really kind of working through my own childhood trauma with my mom. It's that story. The second story that I wanted to share with you today, and we're going to give you a couple of samples at the end of the video, the story time. You're going to hear a couple of favorite chapters that I've ever written, mostly because they were so difficult. And so my story is Beauty and the Bitch, which started out as Big Fat Bitch, was written in protest of the live action and the Beast, because I was really tired. Why do we need another version of this story? Why does the beautiful, sweet girl who's, just stubborn and unique and all those things have to always save the guy? Because he was a literal beast. And you don't see that reversed. You just don't. So I wanted to, and I knew I would write it. And so I wrote it as the beast flip. The woman is the beast, and the man is the beauty. And I made the woman fat because in our culture, to this day, it is the go-to insult. It is the go-to, thing that makes a person lesser than and a second class citizen kind of thing. If they're fat, they're lazy, or they're, a glutton, or they're, selfish, or whatever the negative connotations that come in to play when you see a fat body. I wanted to make that the beast of that story. Not because I think it's a beast, you know, because I live in a big body. I'm looking at it from how I've been perceived in my life as someone who can be, a big fat bitch. And so I wanted to make that character the beast of my story, the woman who's fat and doesn't care what you think about it. And she's, it's her world, you're just living in it kind of thing. And I wanted to make the man the beauty. He's handsome, he's intelligent, well read, loves books. In fact, that comes into play in the story. Um, Stubborn because he's not going to give up on her. And it is a love story. But it ended up being so much more than just a romance. And the reason being is in all the ways that I wanted to pay homage to the original Beauty and the Beast story, I had to have a rose. And so in this story, it's character Sophie's mom, Rose, who was dying. And she's in a hospice environment and she's in this home, not necessarily a nursing home, it's kind of a privately run place where she can be treated palliative care as opposed to curative. And so she's well taken care of. I mean, the dime dropped on this care is not small. She's well taken care of, but she's not loved. There's nobody coming to visit her. There's nobody coming to talk to her. She's just there. And it is the hospice nurse, Fletcher Sullivan, who sees this and wants to correct that because regret is a concrete pillow, I think is the exact way I put it in the book. So he wants to fix it. And he tries to reach out to Sophie to kind of make inroads with that relationship before the last petal drops. And so the chapters that I talk about, the that I'm going to include were the last dance for Rose Thibodeau. And it is one of those surprise stories for me because when I sat down to write it, I had, very set idea of what I wanted to do. And out of nowhere, it kind of flipped on me. And that's why these two chapters are so powerful for me. And the thing that I added that isn't in the original fairy tale was that the beast has a family member that she can kind of talk to, and it's her dad. And her dad and her mom had divorced a long time ago um, because she was an author, very famous, and he's just this simple dude from Louisiana who wants to. He doesn't want the lavish Beverly Hills mansion, nothing like that. So they had that breakup in her early childhood and it kind of even more of her bitchy character. So she's friends with her dad. She's close to her dad. She's, wanting to be around her dad and meeting her dad. His name is Vincent. Ah, if you know, you know. But his name is Vincent, and he actually connects with Rose as well. And I did not see that coming. I did not plan that. That was organically grown out of the story. And it wrecked me. It broke my heart. Because he gets to reconnect with her in a B plot love story I did not see coming. And it is one of the most beautiful things that I have ever written. And the whole reason that I included the hospice angle was in homage of my mom because she died in hospice. She was very demented and she needed palliative care. In the end, I was not able to go and be with her because I lived in California and she was in Texas and I did not have any money. This was one of the really hardest points of my life. It was right after everything changed with Amazon and I kind of lost my writing career, was, trucking along, doing great, hit the wall of, you know, Amazon. We're just going to leave it at that. Uh, Whatever. Anyway, so they had the ball where Rose is about to go. It's her last few days or her last moments and they decide to throw a ball. And Vincent is there to give her this moment, but also Sophie and Fletcher having this moment as well. So it's very dual type of thing, and it was very, very beautiful. I included in one of my mom's favorite songs was "Can I Have This Last Dance" by Anne Marie, and the line is, "Can I have this last dance for the rest of my life?" And so they're dancing because she's right there. And yeah, I told you I was gonna get emotional. I guess I didn't cry it out in the first one. It's fine. So Stephen read it and he liked it. He challenged me. He's like, you had to write something from Rose's point of view. And I was really effing terrified to do that because that put me in her spot, in her frame of mind, right at the end. And opening that pathway, walking in those shoes terrified me. But I did it. And I'm glad I did it because it gave me peace in a way nothing else could have. To know in those last moments that you have those connections. And my mom and I did share a phone call right at the end within days. And knowing that were able to connect, even though she didn't really remember a whole lot, and that's, if you know about that, when you lose someone to dementia that or Alzheimer's, that you lose them before you lose them. So anyway, in honor of my mom, who believed in me and never pulled me back from any of my crazy dreams. When I was showing her the back of a Journey album, telling her I'm marrying that guy, she never told me, you're crazy. She never, when I was talking about being a writer, she was never like, oh, you need a plan B. She believed in me, and she believed in my dreams. And what more could you ever ask for in this life? So, this one's for you, Mom. And I hope you enjoy the next two chapters. They are kind of spoilerish, I guess, but I hope that it inspires you to get to the story because it's what I'm really proud of. It means a lot to me. And I hope you enjoy it. Talk to you next time.
Chapter 33. Marisol Miss Lang had been a hospice nurse for 18 years. She loved her job because even in the midst of unbelievable sadness and crushing grief, she had witnessed more than her fair share of miracles. None was more impressive to her than the miracle that had happened for Rose Thibodeau. When Rose first came to Maison de Lumière, Marisol was told that no one could know that she lived there. She was a notable, you see, someone famous. Her identity had to be protected. Marisol hadn't read the Pudgy books before she began taking care of her, but she sure had read them since then. She had also done her research to try and help this lonely woman who had no visitors and no family to oversee her care. It was clear someone had the means to take care of her. Yet Marisol watched her quickly wither, like the last forgotten flower in a bed full of weeds. She knew what she was doing, introducing Fletcher to her that day. Fletcher Sullivan was one of the finest nurses and noblest men she had ever met. He brought joy to the lives of people who thought they were all out. He simply made things better. When he would bring Ava to Maison de Lumière, he brought sunshine. Marisol knew Rosie could use a little sunshine. She never expected things to have spiraled out of control like they did. Yet, as she rolled Rose's wheelchair down the marble hallway in her estranged daughter's home, Marisol knew everything happened the way it was supposed to. She brought Rose into the Paris room, where stylist Jorge Navarro was turning everyone into the belle of the ball. Now it was Rose's turn. Jorge knelt to Rose's level. She was far past seeing him, but he didn't seem to care. He leaned close, tears hovering in either eye. It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Thibodeau. I'm a big fan of your work. Pudgy taught me how to rise above the haters and turn everything ugly pretty again. And I want to thank you personally for giving this outcast a place to belong." With that, he kissed her cheek. Rose cooed in delight as she patted his hand. She was unintelligible now. Marisol knew they didn't have much longer. Still, a masterpiece could not be rushed. They didn't bother putting her in a dress, though they dressed her dressing gown like she was late for the Oscars. They adorned her with jewelry and stoles, even her own tiara. Jorge styled her shorter hair and then applied makeup. Rose smiled as she closed her eyes and allowed him to work his magic. Within minutes, she was a superstar. Marisol glanced at Sophie, who had turned away to blot her perfectly applied makeup. "I think it's time," Jorge announced with a smile. Marisol took her place behind the handlebars, but Sophie shook her head. "Let me." Never one to interfere with family, Marisol took a step back. "Come on, Mama," Sophie said. Marisol walked just behind, close enough that she could help them if they needed her. This night, however, they only needed one thing: each other. Devlin Masters was already at the piano on the back patio, so the sweeping, romantic, instrumental fascination led their path. Sparkling, twinkly lights had been gracefully strewn around the 4 pillars that had been erected around their makeshift dance floor. The food that Bravo Catering had prepared filled the air with all sorts of tempting fragrances that made Marisol's tummy growl. It was all the makings of a picture-perfect fairy tale, especially when Fletcher and Vincent spotted their dates for the evening. Marisol suppressed a smile when she realized that Vincent wasn't the only suitor who was gobsmacked by how beautiful his date looked. Fletcher's face softened as Sophie glided towards him in her blue ball gown. As glib as he could be sometimes, there was something serious about him now. Serious about Sophie. Marisol wondered if he even knew. Ava joined them as they reached the dance floor. She took Rose's hand. "Pudge," Rose started to say, but it faded out. "You look beautiful," Ava told her. She glanced up at Sophie. "So do you." Sophie smiled wide for the young girl. "Let me take you to your dates," she said, leading the rest of the way to Fletcher and Vincent. Vincent knelt to greet Rose. "Evening, cher. Don't you look like a dream?" She smiled as her head lolled to one side. Vincent didn't care. He didn't see the wheelchair or the oxygen tank or the tiny drop of drool at the corner of her mouth. He saw the belle of the ball, his beloved Cher. He took her hand in his for a long kiss upon her paper-thin skin with all the doting affection of a groom on his wedding day. "Will you do me the honor of having this dance?" Her smile was answer enough. He gave Sophie a kiss on the cheek before he took the handlebars. He rolled her out onto the dance floor in wide, gentle circles to the music as Devlin segued into Anne Murray's ballad, "Could I Have This Dance?" Everyone watched them from the sidelines with bittersweet smiles and unapologetic tears, as if they had gotten a sneak peek of heaven and could barely withstand the beauty there was to behold. Rose's face was blissful as she stared up at Vincent as if she could really see him. Sophie sucked in a sob when the song gave way to Nat King Cole's Unforgettable. Likewise, Vincent knelt on his knees beside Rose to hold her close for a slow dance as he serenaded her the poignant words. Fletcher grasped Sophie's hand in his. Her tearful blue eyes met his in surprise. He gave her an encouraging nod before he led her onto the dance floor. They followed Vincent's lead, slowing down the dance to savor the moment. It was a gift, and they all seemed to know it. They had the rare privilege to know how significant this moment would be. none wanted to waste it. Austin even pulled Ava to the floor for a proper waltz, which he taught her as they danced. Marisol, however, couldn't keep her eyes off of Fletcher and Sophie. They had started out as enemies, combatants, with nothing in common. Yet, somehow, something had happened, quite unexpectedly. Suddenly, they were friends. Even more suddenly, they were more. Marisol watched how gently he guided her around the floor. He would add fancier footwork, like a twirl or even a lift, his eyes locked with hers, commanding her full attention. He ignored the tears that coursed down her face as she shared this painfully beautiful moment with her parents. Even Vincent and Rose were compelled to watch, though Marisol wasn't sure Rose could even focus on anything beyond a few feet. Vincent still wrapped his arms around his beloved Rose, watching their daughter with tears in his eyes. He continued to sing. Eventually, Fletcher did too. Sophie leaned close, wrapping her hand into his hair, weeping softly onto his shirt. As the music faded away, Fletcher kissed her hair. She held on to him for dear life. Vincent, however, had had enough of the sadness. "I think I know what this party needs," he announced as Ava trotted Lugenia out to him where he knelt. He sprang to his feet with the vigor of a man half his age. "Laissez le bon temps rouler," he cried out as he started to play one of his favorite Cajun songs. Devlin, the ultimate professional, was able to adapt himself to the music and fill in. Meanwhile, Ava took her turn dancing with Rose, spinning her carefully around the dance floor to the music. Her hands clasped the fabric of her dressing gown like she was slapping her hand to the beat, but Marisol already knew she was simply growing more restless as her time grew shorter. Sophie taught Fletcher some of the more complicated steps, and he used his good humor to help her smile. Marisol liked that. They were good together, like two pieces of a puzzle nobody else could solve. They had spent endless years lost down all the wrong paths, yet here they were, together at last, having found their way. It was a miracle. It was a fairy tale. It was a moment none present wanted to end. They lingered over everything, the music, the food. When they cut Rose a piece of her king cake, she happened to get the baby. "Next year, party's at our house," Vincent promised. "Right, Cher?" he asked. She simply murmured something nobody could understand as she smiled. They took their time eating. They took their time talking. They even danced under the moonlight as it rode across the night sky. But the night grew short and the candles burned out. Eventually, Rose was asleep in her chair, and Marisol knew that she needed to be taken back to bed for another dose of medication. Again, Sophie took charge. "Let me," she said, grabbing the handlebars. All of them walked behind her as she led way to the Louisiana room. Fletcher and Marisol got Rose situated back in her bed as Vincent, Sophie, and Ava watched. Rose opened her eyes and spotted Vincent. "Vin," she started, but her speech dissolved into nonsensical babble. It didn't matter a bit to Vincent. He was beside her in a second, her hand in his. "I'm here, Cher." Her eyes were earnest as she stared up at him. "Puh," she struggled to say. Fletcher, who was behind Sophie, put his hands on her shoulders for support. Likewise, Ava grabbed one of her hands. It gave Sophie the strength she needed to step forward. "I'm here, Mama." Rose turned to the sound of her voice. As Sophie stepped forward, Rose's eyes widened with a spark of recognition. "Pudge," she started. Sophie sat on the bed next to her mother, taking her other hand in hers. She squeezed it with what little strength she had left. She glanced off behind Sophie. "Home?" Sophie choked up. She didn't even have to turn around to know Rose had spotted the large willow tree in the painting of Cameron Parish, Louisiana. Yeah, that's home. She fought to keep her composure. You want to go home, Mama? Rose barely nodded her head, but it was enough to devastate both Vincent and Sophie with the same subtle gesture. Sophie squeezed her hand. You go if you need to, Mama. It's okay. Vincent wept silently as he held on to Rose's other hand. We know you have to go, and we're gonna miss you, she managed to eke out as her composure slipped. But we will see you again, I promise. We love you, Mama. I love you. Do you hear me? I love you, Mama, she repeated. Pudgy loves you. Tears strangled her as she started to weep. Rose pulled free from her hand to touch Sophie's face. Home, Rose Thibodeau said, and closed her eyes. Chapter 34. Rosa Thibodeau didn't know where she was when she opened her eyes. The room was yellow, with white lace curtains just like her grandmother's house when she was growing up. Everything felt like home, from the old furniture to the basin and pitcher. There was even a painting of a willow tree on the wall that reminded her of staring out her bedroom window as a child. If she closed her eyes, she could swear she smelled honeysuckle and heard cicadas buzzing right outside. She slipped her covers down and stretched lazily. It looked like it might be a beautiful day. She tried to ask the nice Filipino lady about it when she arrived, but she didn't understand her. Instead, she assisted her down the hallway, where a beautiful man waited. He introduced himself, though she didn't catch his name. She knew he was a fan, however. Of course, how could he not be? Who wouldn't love Pudgy? He doted over her and fixed her hair and put her face on, as her mama used to say. He let her wear all sorts of pretty jewels, which she loved. The prettiest girls always sparkled, at least in Rose Thibodeau's world. Rose smiled at that nice lady who had started to coming around. She looked familiar, but Rose couldn't quite place her. She was standing right outside the shadow of her memory. She looked a little like her Aunt Evangeline, but that couldn't be right. Evangeline had been dead for years, just like her mother. At least, that's what she thought. Sometimes she didn't know for sure. Sometimes her mother would come visit and blow her whole theory to pieces. But the lady was beautiful, with kind blue eyes that reminded her of someone else she once knew. When she escorted her outside, Rose was eager to see where this woman in such fancy clothes and such a fancy house might take her. Suddenly, Pudgy was there. Miraculously, she hadn't aged a bit. She was still that spunky little preteen that could run the world if she wanted. Rose tried to tell her again that she could do anything, be anyone. Unfortunately, Pudgy had always had a hard time believing that, and it was like she couldn't understand the words at all now. She gasped when she saw Vincent standing there with that other kind man who had begun to care for her. She couldn't remember his name either, but she remembered thinking he was just the kind of man she hoped Pudgy might one day marry. He was strong, yet gentle, with a friendly smile that always made her feel so at home. And he took such good care of Pudgy. For that alone, Rose was grateful. But it was Vincent Doucet who took her breath away, so handsome in his tuxedo. He bent down to her. Evening chair. Don't you look like a dream? She blushed and hid a girlish giggle behind her hand. You old charmer, she said. Will you do me the honor of having this dance? Of course, she said as she took his hand. The next thing she knew, she was floating around the dance floor, just like days gone by. The wind was in her hair as beautiful music filled the air. She thought maybe she remembered the song, but she couldn't quite place the title. Had they danced to this song at their wedding? It sounded like a wedding kind of a song, one that promised a love that would last forever, like all real love should. It was sentimental and romantic, everything one might want in a formal dance. She wondered if this was her wedding, especially since no one else joined her and Vincent on the dance floor. She finally decided it might as well be. She was in the spotlight with the love of her life, dancing under hundreds of twinkling lights that looked just like stars. By the next song, that nice man and that sweet lady joined them on the dance floor. What a beautiful couple they made, she thought. He wore the same look on his face as Vincent, so she knew in an instant he was in love. She doubted he knew it yet. Men were always the last to know. As she watched the lovely lady, however, she suspected she might not know it either. She was crying. Something was wrong. "We should do something," she said to Vincent, but he couldn't understand her either. He simply held her tighter, as if she had said nothing at all. After that, however, Vincent did do his part to cheer up the crowd. "Let the good times roll," he exclaimed before he grabbed his fiddle and proceeded to perform for everyone. Rose sang the songs right along with Vincent, all the songs from their childhood. Just like all their shindigs down in Louisiana, the party raged on into the night. They had all her favorite foods, and for the first time she could remember, she was the one who got the baby and her piece of king's cake. "Next year, it's on me," she exclaimed victoriously. At least, she thought she did. As much fun as she was having, she grew tired as the night wore on. Finally, the nice lady escorted her back to her room, where Vincent, Pudgy, and the other nice man gathered. Finally, she understood. She was leaving them. She reached for the only man that she had ever loved, second only to her daddy and Jesus Christ himself. Vincent. He was by her side in a second. "I'm here, Cher." She touched his sad face. She wanted to say so much, but it was like he couldn't hear her. "Where's Pudgy?" she asked. It was the only question worth answering. "I'm here, Mama," someone said. Rose turned to the nice woman who approached her bed. As if she was coming out of the shadows, Rose recognized her daughter at last. "Pudgy," she exclaimed as she sat next to her on the bed. They had so much to talk about. It felt like years since they had spoken, and yet she had grown so beautifully, just like Rose always knew she would. "Is this your home?" she wanted to know, quite impressed how well her daughter had done for herself. "Yeah, that's home," Pudgy confirmed as she struggled not to cry. "You want to go home, Mama." She squeezed her hand. "I am home." It devastated Pudgy even more. That was when Rose knew that she couldn't stay, no matter how much she wanted to. Pudgy seemed to know it too. "You go if you need to, Mama. It's okay." Vincent gripped her other hand as he wept. "We know you have to go, and we're going to miss you, but we will see you again, I promise. We love you, Mama. I love you. Do you hear me? I love you, Mama." Her beloved daughter dissolved into tears. Rose reached out to touch her lovely face. She thought about all the times they had shared together, fragmented memories that no longer fit together, but still meant one thing. "Home," she said. "Remember," she said with a yawn as she settled down to rest at last. "Next time the party is at my house,